Tehran might have committed its most monumental blunder by assuming they could actually choke off the Strait of Hormuz. Since no real breakthrough came from the truce negotiations, the United States enforced a total blockade to shatter Tehran's unilateral grip on the waterway. At 10 in the morning on April 13th, every single vessel, regardless of what flag it flies, will be stopped and searched before passing through. Tehran likely never guessed their biggest ace in the hole would end up in Washington's pocket, but with 50,000 U.S. troops on edge, the stakes are massive. Major outlets like Reuters and the Wall Street Journal suggest nearly 100,000 troops might deploy, since Europe isn't helping and air power is already surging. On C-17, Globemaster transports with their giant holds and KC-135 tankers are flooding Middle East bases with elite units and supplies around the clock. Moving in with full force, the legendary Abraham Lincoln Carrier Group is creating a steel dome in the sky with stealthy F-35s and versatile F-18 jets. Washington essentially flipped the switch to unlock Hormuz for themselves while putting their own padlock on the Iranian side. This whole chain reaction started when a line was crossed on April 11th, just 48 hours before Trump gave the order for the blockade. You probably recognize the destroyers, USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. and USS Michael Murphy from our last episode. When those multi-billion-dollar heavy hitters cut through the heart of the strait, they forced open a new chapter that the Iranian Guard found absolutely intolerable. That radio transmission piercing the silence of the Gulf laid bare just how close to the brink this entire crisis has actually come. This is your last warning, final warning, final warning. Pivot toward the Indian Ocean right now. U.S. Navy Vessel 121. This is the Seafon station. You must change course and leave immediately. That chilling radio call was the first real sign that the old rules in Hormuz were dead and that the U.S. was ready to move. However, this friction on the world's geopolitical flashpoints has become so massive that it won't be contained within the narrow borders of the strait. Backed into a corner, Iran began targeting civilian cargo ships in the Bab el-Mandeb by letting their Houthi surrogates loose to spark total chaos. The situation on the ground is pretty easy to read. Two vital choke points in the Middle East are facing two very different problems that both require a fast solution. The U.S. is currently locked in on the Hormuz standoff, and there is no telling when Trump's blockade order will finally be lifted. But behind the scenes, while everyone is watching the massive warships, there is a much more sneaky and lopsided threat developing. The Islamic Revolutionary Guards Navy is trying to flip the script by using hit-and-run sea tactics in those shallow, cramped waters. Their fleet is thought to number over 800 boats capable of hitting speeds of 50 knots. Boghammer and Ashura-class speedboats are basically just fast hulls with heavy machine guns and rocket tubes welded onto the frames. Not stopping there, the regime is bragging about a plan to flood the sky with 300 suicide drones, including the Shahed 136. Meanwhile, just beneath the waves, the sea has turned into a literal minefield filled with hidden explosives drifting with the currents. Finding their exact location is almost impossible. These hundreds of anchored and magnetic mines secretly dropped by small Iranian boats drift randomly and make every trip through Hormuz a total gamble. In this vital passage where the narrowest point is just 21 miles, the gap between massive U.S. destroyers and Iran's lethal speedboats is measured in feet. If a fight breaks out, whether the U.S. can actually keep its grip on that golden lock remains a heated subject of debate. But will the blockade operation triggered by Trump's command actually provide a permanent fix for this regional nightmare? Iran's swarm strategy is designed to bleed the magazines of billion-dollar American ships by throwing thousands of cheap targets at them all at once. That is the single biggest risk for the U.S. blockade. Even losing one aircraft or ship would give Tehran a massive psychological win. Still, U.S. Central Command seems dead set on not backing down an inch until they've paralyzed the ports that serve as Iran's lifeblood. D.C. knows that if they cave to Tehran's threats in Hormuz, now they'll just face the same issues with China or Russia later on. Iran knows this too, so they are amping up the psychological warfare by deliberately making things more dangerous with every passing hour. The jagged Iranian coast is currently hiding hundreds of mobile missile launchers and underground drone bays that even high-tech satellites can't always find. Plus, the reach of lethal missiles like the Noor and the supersonic College Fars puts the entire strait in the crosshairs of a disaster. Even so, the American military, the most advanced force on the planet, is far from being caught off guard by these threats. Washington's first and most crushing move would likely be an overwhelming airstrike to vaporize Iran's missile and drone stockpiles. A campaign focused on destroying those weapons while they are still sitting on their launch pads in the mountains. This is exactly where the A-10 Thunderbolt makes its grand entrance. A total nightmare for ground troops for decades, these sky monsters are famous for the massive cannons mounted right in their noses. Having the Warthog in this tight battlefield is huge because that 30mm Avenger cannon can turn Iran's agile attack boats into scrap metal instantly. Recent buildups at American outposts across the Middle East have effectively doubled the A-10 fleet, bringing the total count to roughly 30. These legendary tank killers are skimming the waves above the channel, putting a vice grip on Iranian naval operations. Yet the success of this mission isn't just about picking off patrol craft along the shoreline. The true menace lies in those massive ballistic missile sites buried deep inside mountain vaults behind thick concrete. That is where the heavy-hitting strategic bombers casting massive radar shadows across the sky prepare to take center stage. Massive B-52 Stratofortresses and supersonic B-1 Lancers have crossed the globe from RAF Fairford to join the fray. Every one of them is on standby, ready to level those hidden underground fortresses along the coast at a moment's notice. Carrying specialized bunker-busting munitions, these aerial titans have the raw power to turn subterranean launch pads into ruins. Facilities that took decades of rock carving and concrete pouring to build could be erased in a single precision strike. At this stage, the American tactical approach is razor-sharp and unmistakable. Don't bother swatting the arrow out of the sky. Just take out the archer and his gear entirely. Basically, rather than intercepting missiles mid-flight, they intend to vaporize the launch sites, command hubs, and radar arrays for good. This air campaign essentially kills the regime's long-standing leverage of turning the Hormuz region into a total firestorm. Leadership in Tehran knows that launching a single anti-ship missile is a death sentence, inviting the full wrath of the Air Force. Betting against F-35s and F-15 in a sky where the U.S. holds every card is a gamble they simply cannot afford. Their aging missile tech stands little chance when faced with the full force of American electronic jamming. Even so, those murky waters still hide threats like suicide drones. Meanwhile, robotic submersibles are hunting for hidden mines on the ocean floor to clear the path. If this maritime deadlock isn't broken soon by high-tech drones and warships, the regional stranglehold could lead to a total meltdown. There is also the matter of where global shipping is redirecting while this chaos unfolds. A top priority for Washington is securing a safe passage through the strait for tankers, free from local interference. As soon as the blockade was official, satellite imagery of the Persian Gulf revealed the massive scale of the disruption. Giants like the Mombasa B and the Aegeos Fenurios, one hauling millions of barrels of oil, are steering clear of the combat zone. These massive vessels are now making a run for the relatively safer waters of the Gulf of Oman. Recent briefings from the White House gave a clear hint about where these fleeing tankers are actually heading. President Trump noted that many ships are turning around and looking to purchase American energy instead. Just take a look at what is happening in the American Gulf. We are loading them up with the finest, highest-grade fuel available on the market. While the iron ring around regional ports halts the flow of Middle Eastern oil, empty tankers are heading toward Texas and Louisiana. Under the weight of this relentless blockade, the regime is struggling to move the 2 to 3 million barrels it pumps daily. Losing that oil revenue, the very thing keeping the lights on, is a fatal blow to a war chest that was already nearly empty. Looking closer, the real victim of this squeeze is China and its massive industrial appetite, which relies on Iran for 20% of its daily imports. Furthermore, the leadership in Beijing has been dodging sanctions for years, using some very clever back-channel methods. What makes this even more tense is that China isn't using the US dollar for these deals. They are paying in yuan. This is a direct, calculated move to bypass and weaken the global financial dominance of the United States. Even the toll system set up in March 2026 favored Chinese ships taking payments in yuan or crypto to avoid American banks. So the start of the blockade on April 13th seems like anything but a random occurrence. We are likely seeing a calculated strike designed to shatter that alternative financial loop. The whole goal is to dismantle the cheap, dollar-free energy pipeline that China has spent years building with Tehran. When Trump warned that any ship paying tribute would be stopped, he was likely looking past Tehran and directly at Beijing's industrial lifelines. Roughly 50% of all Chinese oil imports are forced by geography to navigate through the narrow waters of Hormuz. Now the U.S. Navy holds the keys. If Beijing loses its cheap fuel, they will have to buy from much pricier American suppliers. That would force China back into the American banking system, using the dollar and the SWIFT network for every transaction. In an instant, the years of work China put into moving away from the dollar could be erased by the big guns of American warships. The ultimate flashpoint would be if Beijing decides to challenge the blockade by sending a tanker directly into the line of fire. Will the United States actually pull over and board a massive merchant ship flying the Chinese flag in open waters? Should American forces intercept that vessel, Beijing may view it as an assault on their sovereignty, providing a legitimate excuse for war. On the flip side, if Washington ignores the vessel's transit, the high-stakes strategy established under Trump might completely fall apart. Such an outcome could push Gulf powers like Saudi Arabia further toward Beijing's orbit. It could even fast-track Beijing's long-term goals for Taiwan, depending on whether Washington shows true strength or falters during this Hormuz standoff. Strategic experts are constantly sounding the alarm about this evolving situation. Beijing's quiet maneuvers have the power to turn a regional fight into one of the most catastrophic global crises in history. The moment United States warships lock their sights on a massive Chinese tanker, whoever pulls the trigger first will permanently reshape the global balance of power for the next 100 years. What are your thoughts? At this pivotal moment in history, can Washington truly sustain this blockade and cut off China's vital oil supply? Will Tehran's clever hit-and-run tactics and Beijing's overwhelming financial influence force a completely different outcome? Be sure to drop your thoughts and predictions about this massive geopolitical crisis in the comments below. Signing off. Thanks for tuning in.